As France reels from another devastating knife attack, the reverberations are being felt across the world. The killing of 3 people in a church in Nice follows the beheading of a schoolteacher 2 weeks ago. And again yesterday, a Greek Orthodox priest was shot and seriously wounded in Lyon, although the gunman's motive has not been confirmed. President Macron said the country was under attack from Islamist and terrorist madness. The latest incidents came after Turkey's President Erdogan had called for a boycott of French goods and even questioned Mr. Macron's mental health. We brought together 3 journalists to explain why the rhetoric was becoming so polarised. John Lawrenson in Paris, Nabila Ramdani in London and Dorian Jones in Istanbul. First, I asked John Lawrenson to tell me how Catholics in France had reacted to the church attack in Nice.
Shock and horror, of course. There's an impression, I think, among Catholics, among other French people, as these unspeakable acts of Islamist terror just seem to be piling up. I mean, just coming in every day. That there's just a great wave of deadly hatred rolling towards France at the moment, and they're very much surprised by this, I think, and deeply shocked, and I think very worried.
And so, are churches starting to have their own security? I mean, these were pretty random. This was a pretty random attack, and as you say, on top of so many other attacks.
Well, that's what the politicians are saying, but it's completely impossible. There are 42,000 churches in France. It's just practically impossible to put soldiers or policemen in front of them all. So there's no way that the faithful can be protected when they go to churches. There's a feeling of great vulnerability that anyone can be attacked. A school teacher doing his job in a school, someone going to a church, someone going to a concert, someone sitting in a cafeteria. And all of these different groups, all of these aspects of French civilization have been targeted over the past years and months, and so no one is safe.
And so, are people then perhaps not going to church? I mean, is one way to protect themselves is just not to attend?
Yes, I think that some people will be frightened away from going to church. Now, of course, we've got the COVID situation, which means that the big Mass on Sunday for La Toussaint, the All Saints, will be the last one for the foreseeable future. But I think many people will think twice about it.
Yeah, and Nabila Ramdani, what has been the reaction in France then of the Muslim community?
Well, the immediate effect of the recent unspeakable terrorist attacks is that the Muslim community is shamed and horrified by disgusting individuals professing to be acting in the name of Islam, albeit a gross perversion of Islam. And these barbaric murders intensify hatred and discrimination against millions of people, not just in France, but indeed across the world. And meanwhile, you have politically motivated rabble-rousers joining in this demonization as they desperately try to link terrorist crimes with the vast peaceful community that abhor crimes like these. And dare I say, Mr. Macron's language is being perceived very negatively by the 5 to 6 million Muslims living in France. The view amongst them is that the president's bravado and indeed military type of language sounds as though he's policing all Muslims, the enemy within, and not just a handful of street criminals turned terrorists. And this is especially so as we've seen an awful lot of raids against Muslim organizations, the shutdown of mosques, and indeed a clampdown on Muslim institutions in general.
And John Lawrenson, do other French people, Catholics, do they see these attacks by the president on the Muslim community as counterproductive?
I think you should be very careful with your language there. I think the idea of attacks by the president against the Muslim community is not the right term at all. I would like to ask Nabila how she knows what 5 to 6 million Muslim people living in France think about the president's measures. How can you back that up?
That's the overwhelming perception among Muslim communities that's vented day in, day out. You can go to the streets in Paris or any city in France, and you would hear people absolutely being very disappointed by the way the French president is speaking of Islam and indeed of Muslims in France, not least of all because of his recent statements about French Muslim communities allegedly leading separate lives. And
when I've gone to talk to Muslims after terrorist attacks in the past, which I've done frequently, I hear them calling for very tough measures. And I don't see why a peace-loving Muslim should not want to support the sorts of measures that President Macron was promoting before this first terrible attack against the school teacher just a few days ago.
No, the problem is when you conflate, a group of wicked misfits that should be dealt with the full force of the law, with the vast majority of the Muslim population, and dare I say, non-Muslims in France don't particularly feel secure either. On the contrary, they feel that Mr. Macron has ratcheted it up and the turmoil is clearly intensifying.
Okay, just as Nabila, as you have raised this idea of a sort of ratcheting up the tension, can I bring in Dorian Jones here, who's in Istanbul? I mean, there you have President Erdogan, who himself is questioning President Macron's mental health, and it seems to have sparked boycotts of French goods, not only in Turkey, but in other countries. So there is clearly something in what President Macron is saying which has sparked a great deal of tension.
Well, absolutely. I mean, after the first killing of this French teacher, President Erdogan was very slow to condemn the killing. In fact, it took him several days before an issue of condemnation came out. And in fact, President Erdogan focused more on what Macron's reaction was to this killing and his defense of these cartoons portraying the Prophet Muhammad. And in fact, Erdogan said that this killing was a result of the policies that have been introduced by France, in particular Macron, what he calls this attack on the Muslim faith, this lack of sensitivity, this double standards. In fact, he went even further, where he said the treatment of Muslims in Europe is a continuation of the policies the Nazis used against the Jews. Now, this is very carefully calibrated language to achieve the maximum anger in Europe, because Erdogan is very much focusing on the Turkish diasporas across Europe, which are many of them are some of the strongest supporters. And he sees this as a way of galvanizing support for him. And what he sees is this stance and sentiment that is felt that Muslims are not treated as equal citizens across Europe. It has to be said, though, following the attack on Nice, there was a very fast response. And in fact, Erdogan certainly toned down his rhetoric by saying that no Muslim can carry out a terrorist attack, but said anyone who carries out a terrorist attack cannot be considered a Muslim. So there was a more nuanced response there. I think he understood the growing international condemnation over that attack could further isolate Turkey. But President Erdogan's stance is very clear about it. He believes that Muslims are second-rate citizens across Europe, and these outbreaks of violence are a result of the alienation that many Muslims feel in Europe.
Perhaps briefly, could each of you just outline how you think things should move forward to try and create some kind of bridge and to make everybody safer? John Lawrenson?
Yes, I've been quite heartened to see Emmanuel Macron standing up for what he sees as this part of French culture, which is Charlie Hebdo, etc. I think perhaps this is a moment where, to quote l'Abbé Grosjean, who's one quite leading Catholic cleric, he said, following the killings in Nice, the strength of a country is not only in its army, but in its culture, its history, its faith, and its roots. It's time to stop weakening all of that and for us to be proud once more. That's what he said. I think that this could be a moment to try and reaffirm what France is all about.
Nabila Ramdani?
Well, I think, the whole point of satire is that it's meant to be anti-establishment and disruptive. Yet Macron is literally turning hateful and indeed very weak and funny cartoons into a flagship policy of his government, knowing that it will provoke fear, anger, sorrow, sadness. And I think the immediate solution to put a halt to this abhorrent cycle of violence is for the French government to leave vicious cartoons to the anti-establishment satirists and to concentrate on building up respect and trust with some 6 million French Muslims.
And Dorian Jones, what do you think? How to calm these diplomatic tensions and trade tensions that have arisen?
Well, I think speaking to officials of Erdogan's ruling party, I mean, there is a fundamental belief. They say that Muslims should be protected as all other faiths in Europe. Particularly, they say that anti-Semitism is far more protected, and there's more sensitivity over portrayals which are considered anti-Semitic than compared to what they say is Islamic phobia. And they say until there is a level playing field in Europe, until the sensitivity is reflected to all faiths, you will have this growing alienation which extends towards how the state treats Muslims. And this alienation, if it isn't dealt with, then you will inevitably see more acts of violence.
Dorian Jones, John Lawrenson and Nabila Ramdani.